King of the woo-woo. Yeah, this is part two. So part one cut off when we're talking about how celebrities don't dream anymore. At least South African celebrities, from what I've seen, not just celebrities, by the way, even us, when we dream of wealth, when we dream of, it seldom comes up to more than 50 or 100 cows. Yeah, speak about woo-woo. I think that happens so often in my phone calls. That happens now in the recording, where when you start hitting certain points, like it just cuts or whatever. I think it's bad luck. It's network. I don't think it's anything sinister. I wouldn't put it past, but it's always interesting when it happens. But we move. So I think to continue the point I was making on the last recording, and hopefully this one won't take any longer than 10 minutes, just so I can conclude. But the point I was making was the intellectual orphans, financial orphans for that matter. I think that history is very important. I think there's no way of putting it. I will be doing a lot more research on the topic. I don't think I'll be discussing it as much because I think, as I said, the platform is not solely for education purposes, but also to equip where I can. So a lot of the work you will enjoy and reap the benefits of by taking the journey yourself. Um, Obviously, where I move to, I will share a lot. And yeah, we can see how that works out. But I think on that intellectual orphans tip and the financial orphans tip, it essentially was just to say, I think the further back we go in history, the more we find out about who we are, who our grandparents were or are, even for that matter, the things they've had to overcome. Itakazelo, surnames, man. Back in the day, there are surnames that when you mention them, the whole world moved. I think the latest for us was All Black Mambazo, where I don't think we can comprehend how successful they are as a group, as an institution. Um, to go to the US, to go to the UK, to travel the world and just be able to mention All Black Mambazo, you get a true sense of what it is they've achieved. And I think that's the closest that one can come to describing the type of depth of standing on shoulders I'm talking about, oh, Mam Miriam Makeba, African giants, people who could, with ease, decide to build a life for themselves in Ghana, in Tanzania, in all places on earth, not just the continent. And I'm not just speaking about exile. I'm speaking about people that were so internationally acclaimed. They can walk into any cultural setting, and just the sense of identity and sense of self melts the room, allows the room to gravitate to them. Uvusi Mahlasela, you can't buy it. Hugh Masekela, Hot Sticks Mabuza. I was watching an interview, yabo, it's Mapaputsi. I think may his soul rest in peace. I think he's since late now. Please do forgive me if I'm referencing the wrong person. Um, on podcast and chill, and he was talking about how he was partying Nabo Perez Hilton, like Iguaido allowed him to enter those rooms. And I don't think they did it solely because they were the first, this and that, to achieve that level of prominence, to achieve that level of wealth for that matter. Or TKZ, Benny, McCarthy, Champions League. I think it had to do with a depth of heritage, a depth of knowing who you are so deeply and so fundamentally that you have no other choice but to just be yourself whenever you are practicing your craft or practicing in your field. And I think from a finance perspective, from a resource management perspective, from a generational wealth perspective, we need to tap into those oceans of being again. We need to tap into that body of knowledge, that body of identity again, such that when you walk into a room and you introduce yourself, your name and surname, ithakazelo zakho, matter a lot more than even the qualifications that follow after. Not because merit is not important, knowledge is not important. It's a very significant empirical system of determining meritocracy and validating yourself in a room, that sort of thing. But I think even more than that, it's the authenticity through which you speak, the depth of knowledge and understanding that you embody as a person. All of us can walk in with a finance degree, law degree, singing talent, football talent. But I think it's those people that carry a sense of more than an aura of sort, istima, siriti, as I mentioned. I think it's those people that tend to have a certain sense of prominence and legacy inside of them that just says that this person is transcendent. This person is bigger than what we are seeing in front of us. They have a magic to them. They have an embodiment to them that, Mbekwayo, I think, said of Nelson Mandela, the temperature changed 2 degrees. I don't know if it was up or down at the time, but the room became magnetic. It became magical just by him walking into a room. And I think it's that level of being that I want us to tap into. It's that level of being that I'm saying, look, from an eradication of our orphanage status perspective, it's going to come from that. I think we hold titles, we hold qualifications that on the face of it seem empty. They seem as if, we are just there. There isn't much to us. And we've got projects where we say we want to decolonize education, this sort of thing. And I think, what, maybe the education may not necessarily be broken. It might just be incomplete. And the part of it that's missing is you. It's the you legitimizing yourself. It's the you walking into a room and not saying you're the first, this, that, that. If you're a lawyer, for example, you might be the first to get an LLB in your family, but you're not the first advocate. You're not the first person in your family, in your lineage, in your community. You're not the first person to speak on behalf of people, to present the matters of people, to present the cases of people. If you're an engineer, you might be the first to get an honors, a professional body acceptance, but you by far are not the first to solve structural issues in your village. There's a YouTube channel that I follow. I think it's African Architecture, and they're speaking about how sad it is that we've allowed our architecture to be reduced to artifacts, to be reduced to just mere collection of things, for that matter, and more than moving towards. So it's doing that type of work where essentially they're trying to shine more light on African architecture and actually how intricate it is and how sustainable it is and energy efficient and how harmonic it is with the environment. And I think they start by saying, when I say hut, what do you think of? And for example, that's very big for us because, well, right in our name is finance hut, and they come up with all these legal definitions, a primitive structure, what pre-civilization, that sort of thing. And the channel basically goes on to say, no, actually, the amount of advanced technology that is involved in some of the huts and architecture that you find across the continent we don't even scratch the surface of that, even in the Eurocentric ways. And he shows one of the African artists that are very well celebrated for his creativity and intricate designs, and you name it. And they're basically shining more light into that. I mean, one of the examples they gave is, for example, if you look at the basic door, in Nigeria, it tells a story. Before you even enter the house, you can already see all these pictures and all these designs and all these intricate conversations that the door has. If I take you to, I mean, the most common one or most well-known ones are the Egyptian pyramids. But I think we don't do ourselves enough justice when we don't tap into our history, who we are, and a proper understanding and characterization of, by the time I walk into a room, there needs to have been something that has gone before me, such that when I get in, it's very clear that this person is not standing on their own. They're not an orphan. They're not a mushroom. They're not an intellectual entity that stands on its own. They come from somewhere. They have built onto something. What was crossing my mind was the common retort that maybe I'm trying to diminish people's accomplishments. Absolutely not. I mean, if you're the first woman this and you're the first black male this or the first this, that, and it is absolutely celebratable. It's absolutely commendable. You have broken a barrier that for the longest time, or for as long as recorded history is concerned, may never have been touched by our people. But equally so, don't put yourself in a position where you can find yourself lost, lacking legitimacy, lacking authority, lacking aura, lacking esteem, lacking authenticity in those spaces by not tapping into the wealth of knowledge, the wealth of wisdom, the wealth of history, heritage, culture that you actually come from and derive from. I was just thinking some of the things that maybe that legitimized or created that aura around some of the people that we've looked up to. I've mentioned your Brenda Fathy's, your Albert Lutuli's. There's a story about Nelson Mandela where they were going to have a meeting, and I think he walked in and he asked, I think, the host's driver's name or something like that, or he went to greet the driver personally, that sort of thing. And the host was very fascinated, like, what is of this, And it comes from that cloth, it comes from that basic grounding, that basic grooming of identity and recognizing and seeing people when you walk into a room, when you walk in spaces. And you can imagine that nowadays, you go to give a talk, you don't talk to anybody in your zone, you try not to forget, you've prepared, that sort of thing. You don't greet the guard at the gate, you don't greet maybe the cleaner or the assistant along the way, in the corridors, in the elevator. You eventually make it to the stage and you start speaking, and there's just the sense that you're delivering very well articulated and prepared presentation. And for all intents and purposes, you get your ovations, you name it, but it doesn't reverberate. It doesn't go beyond that room. It doesn't go beyond the follows. It doesn't go beyond the share, the retweets, the reposts, you name it. You hit, the phenomena that shakes me to this day, or what baffles me, that's the correct English word, is people that have got 1 million views on YouTube, or 1 million or 100,000, that sort of, and the sheer appreciation for how many people that is, and just the unalignment or lack of understanding. How can it be that you've got so many people that listen to you, have listened to you, but you still seem not to have escaped that prison or that platform of your channel, or that space of your Twitter or tweet or X? Trump calls it Truth Social. That space of your Instagram, you name it, TikTok. it's almost as if that's it, and there's no sense of celebrity in the olden days anymore. That sense of aura, that sense of magic. That listen, here comes somebody. Here comes a reverberation of stories. And I can only imagine that it probably had to do with the depth of personality and identity of people like Brenda. You got the feeling that when Brenda walked onto stage, she had spoken to as many people as possible, greeted as many people as possible, exchanged stories with as many people as possible, such that by the time she stands on stage, so many people are there with her, and she can own it. She can have a sense of presence on the stage that gives justice to who she is as an entity, because now she's representing a people. She's representing a culmination of stories and identities. And I think for me, that's a lot of the work I'm doing in personal finance, in finance, in investments, in asset management. That deep work to understand 3 generations ago, at my grandmother's generation, Okokbenu, Babuyaphi, how did they end up where they are? Obuthelezi, Ondlondlo, Ondlela, eh, Msimang, Masego, Mukwena, Mphahlele, Chabalala, Mukwe, Baloyi, Mukoni, the more famous, the Royal Bafokeng. I'm doing that deep work to understand it 3 generations back, 5 generations back, 7 generations back, 9 generations back, because it's that sense of legitimacy, it's that bringing back of wealth, finance from that perspective, resource management that holds the keys to how is it that we can make a living, make a life in today's age and times, how we can find relevance in where to put our money, our financial resources, our time investment, our energy, our passion. Because, once you add those to the ingredients, then all of a sudden 1 rand goes so many more or so much further, so many more lives down the line than just taking 1 rand and putting it in the next best available investment with nothing to it. So it's that type of work, it's that type of deep dive that I've been into. And yeah, I look forward to hearing your stories. I look forward to hearing even some of the things that you maybe can relate to or with. If you have an interesting anecdote or story about how things are done in your village. As I say, having been on the continent, things like mosques in West Africa, they adorn almost every room. Sculptors, gold, bracelets, copper, those sort of things. How do they adorn your home? How do they adorn you? Where do they originate from? What's the story they're trying to tell us? What are some of the things that you know about some of those things and practices, and how they've been passed down in your family? How many cows did your great great grandfather have? How much land? Where? Um, Sometimes we think these things are myths, or we think that maybe our parents tell us just to give us a sense of importance. And I say, well, first of all, why not? If you were important, what's the sin in that? There's no reward for self brutalizing yourself throughout history, let alone today. Tell it, tell it. And if someone disproves it, then you may have an alternative story to that. Maybe how they arrived at it, maybe how they came to have such a high sense of self-importance. But if nobody disproves it, you get to pass on a psychology of wealth and asset management and resource management that I haven't yet seen in the everyday practice of Black lives. I haven't yet seen in the practice of everyday appreciation, goal setting, what it is people are looking for. We're not even talking vision boards. We're not talking Sabawell, this and that. We're not talking I wish. We are talking a deep resonance, a deep manifestation of a sense of being and belonging that says that, listen, My kids will get the best education available. My kids will get the best shot at life available. Because a cow here is a cow in America. If I've got 400 cows here and you've got 400 cows in the United States, in the United Kingdom, then we speak a common language. Versus if I've got 100,000 rands and you've got 100,000 US dollars, it's almost as if we're comparing apples to pears, and immediately the sense of inferiority starts to seep in. And before you know it, I'm a nobody in the context and continuum of space and time. And that cannot be. That cannot be. I reject it completely. We are not intellectual orphans. We cannot be, not for much longer. And so I'm saying, let's unearth those stories, let's unearth those practices, let's unearth that study, that philosophy of money, that philosophy, psychology of wealth and how it's been practiced, that philosophy and psychology of resources and resource management, family building, family names, identity. And I think if we ground ourselves in those sort of things, the quality of content, the quality of character and person that we become will start to resonate a lot more. The caliber of people that will stand in front of us and occupy our platforms, I think they will speak languages that we never thought we possibly could ever access. And that will open up a level of compounding. First of all, it will be a recognition of compounding that is unparalleled. There's a lot of wealth that it definitely was not lost. It definitely was not thrown away, especially if even if it's just the story that you get, just to hear how this generation manage their resources. As I said, 9 is the furthest I think we can go. And that 9 is achieved by me speaking to my grandmother about the stories she heard from her grandfather, about the stories that he heard and the life he lived with his grandfather, and worst of all, or the furthest, that story being told to him about his grandfather. And we've covered 9 generations. As I said, as far as I'm concerned, that takes us all the way back. Again, if we say 2024 minus, not even on the calculator. That was supposed to be such a clean end to the conversation. 2024 minus 1790. If you go back 9 generations, that takes us back at least 234 years. That is a wealth of information. That is a lot of compounding. That is a lot of compounding. And I look forward to sharing these stories. I look forward to unlocking all of that wealth that is stuck in your DNA, that is stuck in your being, that is stuck in your family, that is stuck in your grandparents and your parents. Get it out. Let's have these conversations. Let's legitimize ourselves. Let us put an end to being intellectual orphans. I'm Chairman Mo, Finance Hut. It's been great to be of audience to you. And I look forward to meeting you at one of the places where you'll find me engaging. The least of which is not you as my client and me being able to unpack that story for you and your family. Thanks a lot. Cheers, guys.